All right, so we get another inflation report this week. Who's excited? So headline CPI is expected to increase this week, which means that the media is going to scream all about reaccelerating inflation. Don't stress about it though, because current CPI is just now starting to capture last year's plunge, meaning that the numbers dropped big time. This is called the base effect. So we expected this. If you're comparing year over year and looking at averages, you would see that some of those plunges are dropping off. We've already seen them, so you're not going to see as big of a drop in CPI as we have in the last few months. So if core CPI month over month comes back at 0.2% as expected, that would be 3 months in a row. A 2.4% annualized core CPI is a great number, and it ties out nicely with that Penn State inflation rate of 2.2% that I've been talking about over the last few weeks. In other words, if the shelter component didn't have such a terrible lag, we'd be looking at core inflation readings somewhere in the 2 to 2.5% range rather than north of 4%. So that Penn State University rent index bottomed out in March, April this year, and is actually starting to move back up. So that suggests that sometime in spring 2024, the official government metrics of rents are going to start ticking back up, even though the bottom is behind us. Now for super core inflation, economists would take the 3-month average and annualize it, which means it would translate into core inflation of just 1.72%. Guys, that's not a projection. It's just math. Inflation is actually coming down, regardless of what the media are saying, regardless of what the Fed is saying, because they are not looking at current data when it comes to housing. So let's get back to those job revisions. I know I talked about them last week, and I'm going to talk about them again one more time, maybe one more time. I can't promise you that. So some of the quotes on July 7th following that day's jobs report were things like this. This is a strong labor market where demand for higher paying jobs is clearly the trend. This is Joseph Brasuelas, chief economist at RSM. Here's another one. Overall, the job market is outstanding and it's getting back to a balanced and sustainable level. Chicago Fed president. One more. A 209,000 increase in payrolls can hardly be described as weak. That's Seema Shah, chief global strategist at Principal Asset Management. I can go on and on and on. There's a lot more economists talking about this resilient jobs market that we've been joking about over the last few weeks. So last week, that number was revised down to just 105,000. So do you think that they would have been so bullish had they known that the real number was more than $100,000 lower? But hey, how could they have known, right? They were just commenting based on the data they had available. Well, because on July 7th, the prior report was revised down by 33,000, and the month prior to that was revised down 77,000. So job revisions have been like a recurring theme all year long. Literally every single month this year, the jobs data has been revised down. But wait, there's more. Not only have that headline job reports been revised down a collective 400,000 this year, and not only did the annual adjustment revise the gains down by another 300,000, the jobs gains we've made are dependent on some pretty large BLS adjustments. Remember those seasonal adjustments I mentioned last week? Well, the headline jobs gains this year are 1.88 million. That includes seasonal adjustments intended to make the numbers more accurate. So without this adjustment, the job gains for the year would be 958,000, which averages out to about 120,000 a month. Not only that, there's this birth death adjustment, which is, I'm laughing because this is not talking about humans. I know it sounds like something, like a birth death rate of humans. It's actually a birth death rate of businesses. Why they wouldn't call it an open close adjustment, I have no idea. Maybe they were feeling dramatic that day. Anyways, the BLS estimates that there have been 1.02 million jobs created as a result of business births or openings. So more than 1 million of the job gains this year are entirely attributable to the hypothetical company openings. Like, they basically put these seasonal adjustments together, and I'll tell you why. Because that adjustment is based on something called the Establishment Survey, which basically means the BLS calls up 150,000 businesses and asks them jobs questions. Guess what? The 2015 response rate to those calls was 70%. Today, the response rate is 32%. So it's fallen by more than 50%, and they're using this to make their seasonal adjustments. Like, this is a really, really tiny little sampling of the market. So what about the JOLTS report? We talk about the JOLTS report all the time. Guess what? The 2019 response rate was 60%. The current response rate, 30. So it's dropped 50%. So negative revisions, seasonal adjustments, hypothetical businesses. Guys, I don't actually think we've lost jobs this year, but I do believe the truth is somewhere between like the strongest job market in the history of the universe and flat. So it's definitely being overemphasized as this resilient jobs market. It's not as resilient as they're saying. So this is just more data that the Fed is using to increase rates when it's not really the best data. I personally wouldn't make any decisions based on such a low participation rate or make such big assumptions based on that. So like I said, I don't think any of us can talk about where the jobs market really is, but we can definitely say it's not as resilient as they say. And this is evidenced by them continually revising the numbers down. So nobody ever talks about it after the fact. So all we're hearing is like right when the jobs numbers are released, everybody's like resilient, amazing jobs market. And then like a month later, they revise them down and nobody says anything or thinks anything about it. So it is a number to pay attention to and to know that going forward, they're probably going to continuously get revised down until they're down into a figure that are making people more concerned. But yes, so the more confident everyone becomes about a soft landing, the more confident I am that we aren't going to have one. Now, I'm not saying we're going to have this massive crash landing. My only thought is that if the Fed's not using data to make judgments about increasing rates, they're going to take it too far like they have in the past, pretty much every time in the past. So I do think that we have one more rate hike ahead. That said, markets are anticipating next week's CPI and PPI, or this week's CPI and PPI inflation data, to look for more clues on the future of interest rates. This is why Treasuries are up slightly to start the week. Not only that, but I was looking for some data or just, articles, what's going on in the business, because I can't seem to get much information. There's not a ton of information out there about commercial real estate. Everything's pretty much about housing. I mean, honestly, I even saw like today, I got something in the mail from a real estate broker who sells multifamily, and his only report was about the housing market. And it's partially because I don't think there's a ton of data for us out there. We get little things here and there, but not a ton. So I did read this article. Executives at the largest property brokerages had been hoping that the deal activity might pick up in the second half of this year, but most now say they don't expect a major recovery until the second half of 2024, especially for real estate sales. So investment sales and lending probably won't pick up until the Fed signals that its interest rate increases to curb inflation are over. So what's the Fed going to do? Well, there's almost zero chance they're going to increase rates in September, but there's now a 43% chance they will increase in November. So we just have to wait and see what crazy JP is going to do with all this data. And he's not really looking at the best data. So like I said, I do think that we may have, it's more than likely, I mean, it's getting close to like a 50% chance that we have one more increase in November. And, student loan payments are due in October. And most people in the country are projected, or at least like overall as a whole, we're projected to run out of savings in September. So I think we have this kind of perfect storm that's brewing for people to kind of go through a really hard time over the next handful of months. I'm actually already starting to see it in my own, circles of people that are struggling and people are in trouble and things like that, especially in the real estate industry. I know that not every industry is getting hit, but real estate is getting hit pretty hard. And I don't think the worst of it's over yet. So I wish I could bring you guys better news, but interest rates are going up. So any activity that was trying to get started is kind of backing off again. I'm not seeing a ton of activity because you're going into escrow, and then, you probably got a quote before you put an offer in, and then now the offer's in and your rate's higher. So there's a lot of things like that are happening right now to people, whether it be in the residential market, multifamily market, the commercial market in general is just much more conservative than it was before. So if you have questions, like I say every week, you should definitely be getting an updated quote every single week. You just don't know what's going to happen. You just don't know if that lender that your broker quoted you is even available, has tightened guidelines, has decided they're not doing those loans anymore, has decided to merge, and the new bank isn't going to be doing loans, those types of loans right now. There's all kinds of scenarios that are happening right now. So more than ever, it is so important that you stay in touch with your lender on a weekly basis to make sure that those quotes that you're getting and those conversations you're having are still relevant. So have a great week, everybody, and I will see you next week.